welcome everybody. I'm Miller Piggott, and I'm sharing the screen right now with Sherry Sparks, who works with me here at Alzheimer's of Central Alabama, and of course, Daphne Johnston. And we have been doing a series of webinars, and you can find those on ACA's website, all of the webinars that we've done at alzca.org. Daphne's webinar will actually be up hopefully by tomorrow. And it's just growing to be a really nice library of good information that's very current, because all these webinars have been done over the summer since we've been here working from home and working on dealing with COVID. And we were really, really thrilled when Daphne agreed to do a presentation for us. I had the opportunity to meet Daphne a few years ago. You were probably a year or so into your respite ministry at that point. And it's obvious the second you meet Daphne, she has got a lot of ideas and a lot of energy, and she's really changing minds about Alzheimer's disease. And so I was glad that this old dog could learn some new tricks from Daphne. And the one word that comes to mind when you're around Daphne is, this lady is full of joy. She is full of joy. So it's no wonder that her book is called Reclaiming Joy Together. And I nearly cried when I just looking through here at the pictures, because it's such a beautiful ministry. And Daphne's just done such a wonderful job, not just here in our community and in Alabama, but this is a ministry that she's taking really globally. I mean, she's on the move. So I'm going to turn it over to Daphne and let her educate us and fill us with joy. So thank you so much, Daphne, for being here today and doing this for Alzheimer's of Central Alabama.
Miller, I think my mama paid you to say all that. That was so sweet. Well, I am happy to be here as well. And I was just looking at all the people you've had this summer, and what a resource. Yeah. You know, we've used them for our care partners. And as you said, we started our respite ministry here in Montgomery 8 years ago, and realized that the volunteer model was essential for any community, and it could provide a lot of care. And so we've grown it to 18 programs across the country, from Washington down to Tampa. And it's the volunteer community just recognizing that everyday people can make a difference. But to have this network, and roughly have about 600 care partners in there, for ACA to be our #1 resource, y'all's newsletters every week have been fabulous and full of meat, not fluff. And I just want a collective appreciation from them. We really do appreciate the work you guys put in. So I'm going to go ahead and get going, I think. And I'm going to get back to my share screen. So Sherry, you might have to help me. We're going to
go back to your first slide.
Yes. And it's just not letting me get there. Y'all are going to see all my slides before we get there.
Miller, did you want to mention about the CEUs before we?
Yes, thank you, Sherry. For this webinar, we're not offering CEUs, but we do for most of the webinars when you watch them live, not the ones that are, of course, available on our website. So if this is something that's helpful to y'all today, I hope you'll continue to follow us and check back regularly. Or as Daphne said, you can ask to receive the email that we put out every Friday that lists all of our activities and things that we have going on. So
that's great. Thank you. Most of my topic is really directed toward care partners and families. It's not, I won't say healthcare professionals, but it's more our family members. So just keep that in mind. I chose today, I wanted to push myself to do a new talk, to put together some new information, because I've been fortunate to travel. Before COVID hit last fall, I was invited to Australia to present our volunteer model at an international conference. And I've just heard some wonderful speakers, and I wanted to piece together a lot of new information for you guys. And I think hearing why inclusion is so important, community-centered care, and how time can transform dementia, I think we all can have a mindset transformation. And that's really what's needed for us to have the best quality of life opportunity for our loved one. I want to start out, this is one of my personal heroes, Lisa Gianova. She wrote the book, Still Alice. And I'm promoting this book, but I want to promote this story too. The book was such an answer for the 36-hour day. The 36-hour day is the first thing that was usually typically recommended, and it's pretty hardcore. But this was the first book that I read a long time ago that let people experience what it was like having Alzheimer's from that perspective. So I found out where this lady was speaking, and the closest place to me was Greensboro, North Carolina. I hopped a plane, just flew up there one night to go hear her speak. And it was her mindset that gave me a new outlook. Her mindset was she was a Harvard-trained brain scientist, and she was going along. Her grandmother had Alzheimer's. This was almost 20 years ago, and there was no information out there that was common sense language. It was all medical, just hard terms to understand. She had the forethought to think, gosh, I'm going to write a fiction novel that people can really get wrapped up in so they can understand the emotions, the behaviors, and why we do what we do, for people to grasp onto. So that set me free in thinking of the neurologists and the theologians and the psychologists that I've been blessed to hear. I thought, how can we put this in everyday terms that a caregiver who's calling me from a pantry because they're panicked and they don't have time, or late at night on their headphones, or somebody that's just so stressed out that can hear this in bits and pieces, how can we put it in language that we can all absorb? So I hope that's what I can do for you today. She had given us the example in her lecture, just look up the word Alzheimer's. And when I did, I've had to practice to say this. I just typed in Alzheimer's, and one of the first things on the page was, in people with Alzheimer's, the presence of amyloid, beta, plaque, tau. I can't really see the end of the screen because our pictures are there. But it's talking about the promotion of abnormal phosphor, tau, protein. I have really practiced that, and I can't say it. And if I can't say it, I can't understand it. And that is the brain science. But for us to be better care partners, what are we going to do after the diagnosis? How are we going to change ourselves from the science of the brain to the science of the person and the science of the joy? How are we going to transform ourselves? So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to really focus on reshaping our language, reshaping our what our body language says to our loved ones, and really become aware of some things that we can do to change ourselves to better give quality to our loved ones. I put John Swinton on here because I'm going to refer to him over the next hour several times, and there's a 4-minute video of his that if you get bored with me, you need to hang in there until the very end so you can see John Swinton talk about time and dementia. But he has given me great insight. So I got to Australia, and the first person I got to hear was John Swinton. 8 hours I sat in his workshop, but the first thing he said was what stuck with me the most. He said, when we normally have a problem, we call on a friend, we call on a loved one, and if you're really healthy, you go find a therapist. And our problems still exist, but the therapist or the friend is the one that helps you see things from a different angle, see things from a different perspective. And our problem is still always the same. We're still going to have dementia. We're still going to have Alzheimer's. We're still going to have Lewy bodies. But if we can see things from a different angle and a different perspective, that's when we can have that aha moment of, okay, you know what? I can move forward. I can do more. I can be more creative. I can give us a quality of life that I didn't think was going to be there. So I want us to be able to use his thoughts of seeing things from a different perspective. That made me think of my favorite high school coach. I only bring this up because I'm from a 1A tiny little school in Anniston, Alabama, Donahoe, and we had 5 good players and 2 that were okay. We had 7 players. We made it to the Final Four my last year of high school. It was a big deal, but it was due to my coach, because so many times in basketball, if you're familiar, you run and you run and you run, and the coaches would just blow whistles, and you're running for endurance and conditioning to get ready for the games. But she knew that we didn't have time to waste on endurance. She had to get out at the end of practices. Instead of running, we had creativity sessions. We had to pass the ball about 50 times before she would let anybody shoot. And her purpose was she wanted us to see different dynamics, different players and different actions and different plays, how things would work out if we did a bounce pass, chest pass, lob, whatever. But that example has always stuck with me, because in dementia, sometimes I think that our care partners are so focused on the conditioning and the endurance of completing the task through the day. We're so overwhelmed that we got to get through that checklist. We've just got to endure to get to the end of the day, that we forget that we can have a creativity session. And I'm not talking an hour, I'm not talking 2. I'm talking grabbing those small moments. And I know we've all heard 1,000 times living in the moment, but when you can grab a moment and make it something fun, break out and row your boat, break out in a silly face, those small things are what can fill our bucket for the rest of the day. So I want us to be creative, and I want us to just think of some new ideas, and again, to be aware. One of the first things I wanted to talk about today was inclusion rather than tolerance. You know, if I was trying to think of a slide that I was used for the word for tolerance and inclusion. And for inclusion, it was a little kid's birthday party. And it was that little girl sitting at the end of the table that had not got included in the big group, and how painful that was. And I have thought of that often. That would just be awful. But I couldn't find a slide that represented inclusion like my guys at Respite. This is just one of our pictures. There's probably 50 people in the room that day. But there's 2 guys in this picture that cannot verbally communicate at all. They have aphasia. They have no idea what's going on. That llama came in that day. There was a lot of joy. Everything was rolling. But they were included. They got to come to the party. And I think that so many times we think we're doing a good thing if we invite somebody to the table. You know, we give them a seat at the table. We say, you know, we're making the best of a bad situation. Come sit with us. Come sit with us. But with dementia, we've got to go above and beyond. We can't just create a space at the table. We have got to recognize and celebrate and just appreciate what communication and what emotions our friends are giving us back. These 2 guys here that can't really talk, we've got to slow down, and we've got to appreciate what they can bring to the group. We don't want to just create the space in the circle. We want to celebrate what their thoughts are, even if it takes a few extra moments to figure it out. I hope that makes sense. One thing I want to talk about with inclusion is our awareness and the dignity and the pride and the value that we can instill in our loved ones, right? It's up to us. Once this diagnosis is formed, how can we as the care partner begin to build confidence in our person? So I've kind of swapped roles, swapped positions here for just a minute, and I want us to think about the many hats that we've worn over our lifetime. If I'm thinking about my dad right now, he's been a child, he's been a grandson, he's been a husband, he's been a provider, he's been a father, he's been a neighbor, he's been a servant, and he's sure been a friend. But when we get diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia or any other related disease, the first thing that comes across our head is Alzheimer's patient. And that's the label that sticks, right? We have got to do a better job of pushing past that label. That once you label somebody the patient, you're making them inferior to you. You're making them in a junior position. You're making them the receiver of everything. They do nothing. What do you think that does for self-esteem? When we talk about inclusion, it's like, look at our friends with Alzheimer's. It's not that they don't want to be included, but when we label somebody as a patient or label somebody as inferior to us, they don't even want to be included. They want to stay home. How often do we run into our families that their loved one just doesn't want to go out? And you'll hear the daughter say, oh, Mom, I've tried to get her to come, but Mama just won't come. But when you feel inferior to everyone, it's very difficult to push yourself forward. My new favorite guy besides Dr. Swinton is Dr. Stephen Sabat. I hope all of you will try to get this book, Alzheimer's Disease and Dementia, What Everyone Needs to Know. He's a psychologist at Georgetown, professor emeritus. He learned his material from working in day centers all day with his people, going into home visits. And this book is written more in layman's terms that we can all grasp onto. I highly recommend it, and I've got a lot of material in this presentation today from this. But he points out, he asked the question, I once heard him in a lecture say, I want you all to think about, I'm going to go back to this, I don't want you to see my answers. What is the worst attribute that you have in yourself? What's the worst attribute you can think of, the biggest challenge that you're going through in your life? So I was thinking about it, putting these slides together. I thought about my friends and my family, just people I've known in the past. There's some people that can be a neurotic perfectionist, insecure while among friends, living with severe depression, financially bankrupt, spiritually bankrupt, anxiety-ridden. Those are all some pretty challenging things to live with. But you know what? We have the opportunity to camouflage that. If I was living with all of those, no one would ever know it. Maybe in my behaviors, but I could hide it. And I could live like I normally do. People would not know that I'm living with a great challenge. But Dr. Sabat points out that our friends with Alzheimer's and dementia, they don't get that choice. Unless we talk about these things early on in the diagnosis, you know, honey, this is so hard. I mean, have we given any thought to how we want to tell our friends? How do you want me to talk about this with our family? Do you want to tell the neighbors? Do we want to go on with it? How are we having a discussion where we're not just sticking that label straight on somebody's forehead? Because as Dr. Sabat says, we have control of our story and our image, and they do not. We always want to put our best foot forward, right? They don't have that opportunity unless we help them. So how can we help them be included? How can we help them be independent and support them? Is really having face-to-face conversations and hard talks with them to figure out how best to support them. One of his cohorts says, someone he mentioned in his book, Elizabeth Anscombe, what you see determines how you respond. Listen to this quote. She says, she suggests the way you describe something is what you think you see. And what you see determines how you respond to something. It's what you think you see, right? So if we see a care partner with that sing-song baby voice, ignoring their loved one, super busy and pushing past them, treating them like they were a child, that's how others are going to treat them. We are the first persons on the front line, the protector of our person. And it's, again, being aware of the image we're helping them put forth. She suggests, Dr. Spott suggests, that there are several things that we can do to avoid that big Alzheimer's label, to avoid having the big red A on our chest, but there's several things that we can avoid, not just to add to our bank, but things we need to avoid. Depersonalization can happen quickly when we look over someone, we're in a hurry, we ignore, we brush them off. Essentially, they're talking about how every one of these things are things that we need to avoid in our actions, but when they do occur, that this is like attacking their self-worth and edging them toward a feeling of burdensome and hurt. And here again, who wants to go out and be in a social group when these are the the feelings that you've got bubbling up inside. This is a complicated slide, and I'm not going to spend too long on it. But Dr. Spot does give 4 points to practicing our internal control, things to keep in mind while we're with our person. Number 1 is accepting the dementia-related deficits and not making them the most important thing of our focus. Focusing on a diagnosed person's remaining strengths. Forget the weaknesses. We all know they're there. We deal with them. But let's celebrate and focus our strengths. Number 3, seeing with great compassion the vulnerable person inside. They did not ask for severe brain damage. They didn't. They're doing the best they can. So what is our patience in working and supporting them? And number 4, remembering the person diagnosed may have some deeply injured pride. They really need our help. I can think of several of the friends that I've got that have some very hurt pride. I want to tell y'all a quick story. When we're talking about hurt pride and the 4 things that Dr. Sabat was talking about, he was talking about how our actions, our language, how we hold ourselves as care partners, people are always watching us. That's our legacy of love. When we can evolve ourselves and get more tools in our care partnering toolkit, that's our legacy of love to our children, our neighbors, our grandchildren. And I just happen to think that one of my strengths is to throw in personal stories. And this woman, Kate Lindsay, has meant so much to me. She was one of my first care partners in my group 8 years ago. And her husband was almost unresponsive at the time of my phone call. This was a good picture of him in early years. But I called Kate one day and I said, Kate, what you up to? And she said, well, Daphne, I'm just browning some hamburger meat and some onion, and I'm going to mix it with some mashed potatoes, and then I'm going to puree it all for Dan for his lunch. Okay, that was 8 years ago, and I will never forget the flavor that she was trying to add to a lunch for Dan, who had probably not spoken in several months, who probably only sat up 4 or 5 times in a week. But Kate was spending an extra 45 minutes to brown meat and onions and puree her potatoes because she wanted her precious Dan to have some flavor. What is our legacy of love? What is our legacy of love? When we're talking about grabbing these moments and things we can add to our tools to better someone's lives, things we can avoid, she's the example to me of the legacy of love, of the small things that we can do that can matter. Talking about control, we touched on Dr. Sabat. This is his quote here. We all know we cannot control dementia, but we can practice and we can give ourselves more confidence, which leads to greater control. So let me make sure that slide's there. About 3 days ago, I've been working on this talk for several weeks, but I heard a sermon of a guy in Texas. And he was talking about how out of control the world was. You know, you've got the pandemic, the economy, school going to start back, racial tensions, everything seems like it's out of control. But his message was, I want us to see what we can control in our own personal life. So he listed things like, I can control my own level of optimism. I can wake up in the morning and decide, you know, how I'm going to be. I can decide, I can control my food. I can control my circle of friends. I can control, do I give my influence to the people that need it the most? Can I help people along the way? He listed about 20 things like that. But I just happened to have the thought of, what is care partners? What is care partners can we control with dementia? Because we know we sure can't control the disease, right? Nobody can control what the body does and what's happening. But what can we control in ourselves? It's going to give us more confidence. And so I just sent an email out last night to my 100 care partners. And I said, guys, I got this presentation tomorrow. I want your top 5 answers. What can you control because you're living it? What can you control in caring for your loved one? And I just wanted to share these with you. I just thought they were so deep. They're better than anything I've shared from a book. So what can I control? One man wrote in these 5, and I was so proud because they're so true. He says, I can control how sincere I am with my wife. Or do I show less love and caring? And if so, how does that make her feel? Scary. Number 2, I can control that I've got to wake up with an I can do it attitude and be tough enough to make it happen. Number 3, find the joy buttons for you and your care partner. Remember those when they're needed. And number 4, I can control her physical opportunity for exercise. She swims a lot, so he's got to make time for her to go do that. So as care partners, can we control that? Number 5, I really like this one. I need to be more disciplined in making sure medicine is taken daily. 80 to 90% is not good enough. I bet Miller has dealt with this many times in the past, and I have in my care support groups. I know people either are in denial, they're not thinking straight, they're not doing what they need to do, and they're not doing the meds like they need to do. So we've got to make some small turns to help our people. This was my favorite. Okay, I can't see it because of the screen. I'm going to read it off my paper. Equipping ourselves really helps, especially being connected to others. Hearing others' struggles, successes, and best practices helps us find the way to address our own needs for caregiving. I guess part of the journey for me is to surrender control and be okay with that without seeing surrendering as defeat. Boy, that is heavy. Let me say that last sentence one more time. I guess part of the journey for me is to surrender control and be okay with that without seeing surrendering as defeat. I know you guys have been living with that. I might not have put it into words, but that's pretty strong. I thank my caregivers, if they're on here, for sharing that. And along those lines, I just wanted to make one more plug for joining a support group, because we're only going to get better as care partners if we practice and we seek out advice from others and different angles and different perspectives. And the best way to do that is get in these Zoom support groups right now through COVID. You cannot blame anybody but yourself. Ask for support. A neighbor or a child will come over and help you with Zoom. But I know there's several in Birmingham. There's several around the state. You can join ours. I threw this slide in here pertaining to the support group because some of you might have heard of Malcolm Gladwell, and he's got the book Outliers. He's got a theory in there that you become the most confident professional of who you are with 10,000 hours of practice. So somebody, a master violinist, a master sportsman, a master, politician, music group. He gave the example of the Beatles. They played 30, 1,000 hours before they became just absolute rock stars. We have to put the time in and seek ways to get better, right? And the best way to do that is through support groups, because you're mixed in there with these veteran people that have lived through these experiences, and they've got so much wisdom to offer. The next thing is you have to be open to new information. You got to be open to new advice and put your thoughts aside and try somebody else's new advice. So please, I beg you, go try to get into a support group. I'm moving on down, actions to avoid. I think my slide got mixed up before, but this is Dr. Sabat's list. Actions that we can drop from our everyday life right now. We don't have to add anything to this list, but these are things that we can easily drop. Making our loved ones feel like they're in treachery, disempowerment, infantilization, intimidation, labeling, stigmatization, outpacing, and invalidation. He's got several more, and we'll break it up in just a minute. The one that stands out to me right now is outpacing. How many of us just run through that list trying to get done and not giving them the opportunity to take a few extra minutes to let them be part of it? But all of these things I know I've experienced with people I've come across. I break it up because in his book, he gives the example of Tom Kitwood, one of the major Alzheimer's pioneers of the past with research. He says, you know what? Every one of those things that we just listed, every one of these things is like pouring salt into an open wound. So when we experience all of these things, we've got a brain disease, we're in confusion, we're kind of living in a fog, nobody's worrying about what we're trying to say. Imagine if this was how you were walking around all day. It would be pretty hard to want to be social, and it would be pretty hard to want to carry on. It would be pretty hard to want to get out of bed, right? He goes on to list a few more things. Objectification, ignoring, imposition, withholding information because you think they can't understand, accusing them of doing things or accusing them of being good 1 minute. Why can't you understand this? Because we just went over it. You're doing this on purpose. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that in the support group. Mockery, disruption. These are all things that are the open wound. And those are things that, you know, we don't intend to do those things. Kitwood goes on to say, they just happen. There's no maliciousness in it, but they happen because we don't understand the disease. We haven't sought out new angles. We haven't educated ourselves. And doing the best we can sometimes just puts people in a ditch. So our greatest efforts are to add new things to our bag and avoid these things that can put somebody down. I want to move on to my second topic, and that's community-centered care. It kind of rolls into inclusion. You know, 15 years ago, I was the director of the largest retirement community here in Montgomery. And the big catchphrase back then was person-centered care. If you've been in long-term care, you know that person-centered care, it was great. The big catchphrase came out, and it really wanted people to tailor help to people's individual needs. You couldn't just treat people like a big herd of cattle and say what's best for one is best for all. So person-centered really meant, you know, we wanted to focus on the person. But I'm telling you, as I've watched the past 8 years of my respite program, and I've seen the armies of volunteers and the armies of people come and go, I realized that phrase, I don't think for our whole life that we lived person-centered. Most all of us have been big community people. We've been big church people. We've been big education people. We've wanted to be part of the greater part of society. And in a few ways, it's kind of odd to have people just focus on you. Is that really yourself? I have seen so many of our people just blossom because they got put in the respite setting where we had 15, 20, 30 people where they were in a group again. They were in a herd. They got to be in the synergy of a group. And that's where I had that aha moment that I wanted to focus on community-centered care. Because I know I've got several retired professionals that would never want anything to just be completely tailored to them. I'm kind of mixing the definition up a little bit, but you see where I'm going with this. Community-centered can make all the difference in inclusion. Swinton says it best. He says, still can't see that. Anyway, dementia doesn't just happen to the person. It happens to the care partner, to the grandchildren, to the children, the friends, the neighbors. We are all living with dementia, and the issue belongs to all of us. It is the whole community's, you know, it's all of ours to deal with. And I just remember going to tackle him in Australia at the end of the talk that he gave, and I was like, you don't understand. I've got the volunteer model. This is where we can create these relationships and an opportunity for our friends living with Alzheimer's and dementia to still be part of service projects, to still be part of the community, and to get away from the individual care. Swinton also goes on to say that we are in desperate need of others to know who we actually are, to know our own story. He gives a great example that to be a child, we need a father. To be a sister, we got to have a brother. And if we're a friend, we got to have a friend. And every one of you on this call knows that when you get labeled with this disease and diagnosed, that either we go into self-isolation or our friends isolate us. It is very hard to come out of that. It's very hard to get back in the community. But he says, the warmth of safety and good friendship is absent if our friends fall away. Medical care is one thing, but who wants to fix your body up just to get better if there's no joy, if there's no friends, if there's no singing, if there's no laughing? We've got to continue to be in the community-minded spirit. He thinks that the memories that we all have, they're not really lost with Alzheimer's and dementia, but they have lost the distortion of what we can recall. But the memory is still there, and those that were part of the memory can help bring back those emotions, right? The memories haven't just disappeared. We've got to find a way to be with our people, and it's hard through COVID, I get that. But through that, we've got to find a way to be with our people and help bring back the joy. He calls it corporate memory. Corporate memory. We all function best as communal beings. With this in mind, how important is our language describing our loved one? How important is it for our friends and our family to relive great stories from the past and help lift one another up? I was just talking in our support group how hard it is to carry on a conversation with someone that maybe has no verbal skills. One of my care partners, he said, I just break out in the Alabama fight song. I break out in row, row, row your boat. I break out in song. I break out in laughter. I break out in a Reader's Digest, just sitting to read. But I'm providing a small amount of community for my person. So what can we do to help support that theory? Once again, he says, we don't actually forget anything. We just have a hard time accessing the memories. But the neurons and the synapses, they're all moving in our brains. Science is happening. The damage is occurring physically. But the visits, the music, the food, the small things that we can provide, those are the things that can help our brain reconfigure. It can help our muscle memory, our emotional memory. They can come back to life. So just a quick run-through list. These are things, I know we all know how to be a friend, but just to understand some things, to be aware of the special effort that we might need to take to be a friend to someone with dementia. Understand and acknowledge the person's strengths while understanding limitations at the same time. Recognize the person's fundamental values have not changed and help them maintain them. Treat the person as a whole individual, not a patient. Are we treating our person as a whole individual all throughout the day? Provide a non-anxious presence. Friends make eye contact while they're speaking. So many times I'll go to a house and go visit, and you'll find someone looking at the care partner talking, but never talking to the person living with dementia. So train yourself. Use that skill. Friends celebrate each other. They celebrate. They don't disappear. They show up. They're there. They're there on a call. They're there in small touches on the front porch. They're there through thoughtful notes. They're there. And they can't always make a problem better, but they can help weather the difficulties. So your presence does matter. So when you're saying, oh, I can't go by, they're a shell of themselves, I don't want to remember him like that, well, you were probably never a friend in the first place. That's the storm where they need you the most. You got to gut up, and you got to do it. I wanted to give you one small example of just small things that we found through our respite ministry and across the Southeast, our other programs are doing. I happened to think we were going to have a watermelon drive, and we were going to deliver 65 watermelons one day. But I thought, oh my gosh, we're never going to be able to carry those, and they probably can't either. Somebody had the idea that, you know what, we're just going to go put a carton of fresh blueberries on somebody's porch with a "I was thinking about you today" card attached. 4 or 5 tomatoes, somebody's porch. Hey, thinking about you. I hope you have a good day. I hope you're there. These are just tiny little things that we can do to show somebody that they're still part of the community. They're still part of our care. So now I want to move to the third topic, and I know I'm speaking rather fast, so this is probably going to be the fastest talk Miller's had. But this is John Swinton, the guy I was telling you about, and this is his take on time, and it was so meaningful that I wanted to find a way to get it into this talk. It's just powerful, and I think once we can be aware of our presence and our power with our friends, I think we'll be better friends and care partners.
I'm John Swinton. I'm Professor in Practical Theology and Pastoral Care at the University of Aberdeen. The basic theme of my talk was around time and the significance of time for understanding people with dementia and for dementia care. And so I was kind of making a point that we being Western people, tend to think of time as linear. So it's you're moving from this place to this place to this place in a kind of forward dimension. And the problem is that kind of takes over our lives. So we're always moving forward to another dimension. And we never get the opportunity really to stop and experience things in the present. And one of the things that people with advanced dementia do, and that you have to do to be with people with advanced dementia, is to learn to be in the present moment. Not to be thinking for the future, not to be constantly thinking back to the past, but to live in that space, which is the now, which is a difficult space to be in. They lose the sense of time, or it's not so much lose a sense of time, they lose the sense of tensing time. The idea that there's a past tense or a present tense or a future tense isn't part of people's experiences. So all you have is experiences that happen in the present in that way. So it's not like people, when they think about folks who they've experienced historically in the present, it's not like they've gone mad or lost touch with reality. They just lost their way to tense time. And so when they experience that and when they're talking about that, it's meaningful, it's real, but it's in the present. Yes, it's the whole idea of how difficult it is to be present. So if you're with somebody who communicates differently from you, and who doesn't give you back the social goods, the feelings, experiences, body language that you're used to, the temptation is to look away or to go on your phone or to talk to somebody else beside you. And so in that situation, you're present because your body is there, but you're not present at all. And that's an issue for particularly younger carers who haven't had that experience of how to be with people in a different way. And so that becomes really problematic because you're actually abandoning people even though you're sitting beside them in that way. And so what I was talking about was the significance of recognizing the importance of not speaking. And that through physical gestures, eye contact and touch, you can enter into the rhythm of another person, even though you don't have words. You may have words or symbols, but there are ways in which you can engage with somebody that just you can capture a way of entering into their presence and then see what happens. Well, the three dimensions, hope, faith, and love, really just a framework which has two dimensions, because obviously, the Apostle Paul, when he's talking about spiritual gifts, he says that faith, hope, and love are fantastic, but the greatest of these is love. So it was kind of a movement within that. But looking at each dimension as a way of helping us to understand people with dementia differently. So hope, the temptation is to always be looking backwards in relation to people with dementia. So even something like reminiscence, you're bringing the past into the present, and if people respond, you think that's great, which of course it is great. But everybody has a future. Everybody needs to be moving towards something, and it's not any different for people with dementia. There is a forward-looking movement. You need to hope for something, and there's lots of ways in which we can encourage well-being and hope in people's lives. So that was kind of where hope was. Faith was to do with not giving up on somebody, to having faith in the individual, that actually perhaps there's more going on in somebody's life and somebody's experiences than you, with your limited knowledge of what really is going on, can comprehend. So faith is basically giving the other person, in this case a person with severe dementia, the other person the benefit of the doubt. Instead of beginning by thinking that everything is terrible, which is kind of the cultural story, begin with the possibility that, well, maybe this is more hopeful. I'm going to put faith in this person and we're going to see what happens. And so that takes a certain kind of time, because you need to slow down and notice small things rather than have expectations of huge things. But when you notice the small things, like your faith is enhanced in that way. And then love is just what everybody wants. Like, it's just what this, that's kind of why we exist. And it's not any different for people with dementia. It's the same for all of us. So how we enable people to feel loved, I think, is fundamentally important.
So he was worth going to Australia for, right? 8 hours. Good guy. Good guy.
And Johnston.
Okay. I hope I can move on. So I'm not even going to add very much to that because I think he just explained the whole thing. And again, this whole talk is about awareness of different things that we can better in ourselves to give our person a better quality of life. He ended the conference with this quick story from a Japanese theologian. I'm going to try to say it correctly, Kasuki Koyama. And he was talking about how this theologian had made the analogy. His whole book is named The 3 Mile an Hour Guide, that Jesus, who is God, walked 3 miles an hour. And what he means, I was fortunate enough to go to the Holy Land back in February last year before COVID hit. And I got to see the deserts and I got to see the terrain and all the things. And this man clocked how fast we walk. And he surmised that the speed of Jesus, who is God, he walked 3 miles an hour. And God, who is love, walks 3 miles an hour. Therefore, if love has a speed, it's 3 miles an hour. And that speed is slow, it's gentle, and it's inclusive of all. Love speed is 3 miles an hour. So if you're the person that's running through the task list, the groceries, the baths, the meds, all the things that we've got to do, we're chasing something, we're chasing at a speed that we're never going to be able to keep up. We're never going to be able to endure the speed we're doing unless we can find a way to slow down somewhere. Maybe one good thing of COVID is going to teach us to at least stay home and slow down just a little bit. But it's our time and it's our presence and it's our love that we spend with our people that's going to make all the difference. So let me recap just a few things that hopefully we took away today. Number one is the importance of inclusion rather than tolerance. And really the inclusion piece of this is us as care partners becoming more aware of how we can support our person. Number one, to want to be included. But number two, how to give them confidence in their image and putting their best foot forward. How to see dementia from a different perspective. Learning to be creative instead of enduring. Practicing control in ourselves. Things that we can avoid, things that we can add into our care routine. The benefits of community-centered care and how time can transform dementia. I believe that if we can somehow find a way to meld all that together, and again, I'm not living it, but day to day, if you just improve just a little bit, I think we're going to have better quality of life for all of us. It takes work. It's 10,000 hours. You guys can put it in. So Miller, that's all I got.
Okay. Well, thank you, Daphne. We appreciate so much your being a part of this today. Do we have any questions or comments that you can put into the chat box from anyone? Daphne, I found that so helpful. I remember a long time ago, I was at a support group and I was a guest speaker at a support group, not one that I normally do. And someone had brought their loved one. They were there for the first time. And when we were going around and introducing ourselves, it was clear that his wife had dementia. And that's pretty much the way he introduced her. And she was so embarrassed. And at the end of the support group, I was going to try to get over and give her a hug. And she was running out the door. And he's yelling, "There she goes again." And I thought, well, no wonder, because she's trying to get away from an embarrassing situation. Whereas he was thinking she was wandering or had this behavioral problem of not sitting still.
Right.
And it was a normal human reaction to the way she'd been treated. And sometimes we forget all those things. We forget to have that empathy. So this was such a good reminder on so many different levels. And thank you for introducing us to so many wonderful, wonderful people from around the world that know more than we do. And
I'm glad you brought that up because there were so many times, and I forgot to just tell these shares, but when people would drop their loved ones off with us at Respite, there were so many times where you would see a husband fix his wife's hair and tuck her blouse in and pat her on the back and, "Oh, honey, are you okay?" She just can't remember day to day, da 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 da. And just the most painful interaction. You just want to choke somebody and you can't, and we've got to hold back. But just multiple times over the years, how we've seen people introduce their loved ones, and it, when they run away, that husband, just like you said, they're going to turn around and say, this disease, and makes her go like that. And it's like, no, really, it's you. It's having the discussion up front of how we want to handle this.
We've had a comment from somebody. Robert Baldwin says, comment on caregiving is a mission from God.
I don't know Robert Baldwin, but my mission, I have felt so disconnected through COVID, because I think that my religion has turned into respite, and my religion had turned into seeing Christ in the interaction of care partners and volunteers, my folks living with dementia, because it's the most humble crowd of people I will ever come across. And it's the most real and honest. And I feel so fortunate to have gotten to leave the profit world of assisted living and long-term care. And I know those jobs are needed. But to be in the mission field with care partners, it's life-changing. And to be separated, I know it's got to be really hard when we're all alone, but it sure has changed my life. Before, I've never been a care partner. I don't even have anybody in my family with Alzheimer's. I just fell in love with the genuineness and the authenticity and the humbleness of people going through this disease. And it changed my life. I was wrapped up in a circle of girls talking about jeans and countertops until I found respite. And my whole life just changed. This whole community, to see the care partners, and I won't say sacrifice, but to see you guys change your life for your person. Y'all have been the ones that have inspired me the most. The person is living with this treacherous disease and finds a way to go forward, and they're inspiring in their own. But it is a mission, and you guys are definitely sent by God to handle it.
Don't you think sometimes, Daphne, that people, it's almost as if caregivers have a choice to make, and it's a daily choice or a minute by minute choice, to be enriched by this experience or to be embittered. And it's just a tragic outcome when you don't see someone seeing this as the opportunity for positive change in their life, when they only see this as a burden.
Well, I get it. I think the fatigue could just wear anybody down, and it's not like anybody intends for this to become a burden. But then it does, and then it's year after year after year of thinking that you're living in a burden, and your prayers have gone unanswered. And it's just not the case. One thing I read the other day was, buzzards wake up seeking something dead. That's their survival. Hummingbirds wake up and they're always seeking something sweet. And you know what? We typically find what we're looking for. We typically find what we're looking for. So how are we going to let our thoughts and our actions guide us towards something alive and sweet and kind and patient? Or are we just going to let the buzzards take over? Because it's a long life to live if we think this is going to be a burden every single day. You got to get over that initial shock, gather yourself, and then go find a dadgum support group, get some of these books, but live the experience of being able to let things go, and really being able to let it go.
Well, Daphne, I'm just listening to you is a real joy, and it's been a real privilege to have you be a part of ACA for a little while today, and to share all your wisdom. And I think this webinar is going to be a great resource on our website. I hope people will go back and look at it again when you need a little dose of hope, because this will be there to give you that little bit of inspiration. And also, please share this resource with other people who you come in contact with who need to hear this very, very important message. So Daphne, we're all clapping for you out here in our homes and in our offices, and we're giving you a standing ovation for the wonderful job you did today and the message that you brought us.
Oh, you are the best. I know my mama had something to do with you. Thank you.
Well, you're
All
welcome.
are the best, and we're so thankful for the resource you guys are to all of us. So keep it up, and your work is it expands, and it's real, and it's stuff that we can put into action every day. So thank you for what you do for us. But
Well, you're the dementia pioneer, and we appreciate it. We really do.